Alright YouTube, what are we doing today? Well, open up the Google box here with my little pocket computer. What we're doing is, this is an industry kind of close to my heart. I spent 6 years putting these things in North Dakota, but we're not in North Dakota. In fact, we're in Montana. This is we are going through one of the oldest oil fields in the country. This oil field was founded in October 8th, 1915. The only reason why they're drilling out here is they found a natural oil seeps coming up out of the ground, just making little puddles. Same way that they found the oil field down there in like Odessa and Midland. The old farmers back then would pray that when you drill a water well you wouldn't hit oil, because, well, back in the early days of Texas history, oil wasn't, natural crude wasn't used for much of anything. That being said, you know, groundwater was more important than the dino juice coming up out of the ground for, well, these things. But as society progressed, oil became more valuable. Therefore, you know, then all these farmers knew they had oil. Come drill my land. Well, this oil field, founded in 1915 due to natural oil seeps. And this is all public land. Granted, you need to be cautious out here. There is H2S gas or hydrogen sulfide. You need to watch the wind. I don't know if you'll be able to tell, but on that storage tank up there, there's a windsock. Every one of these tanks where they have, like, yeah, there's supposed to be a windsock here actually, but there's windsocks everywhere out here because you need to know your wind. Because if you have like a bad wellhead and it's leaking H2S gas out of it when the pump jack ain't running, well, bad things can happen. H2S gas is heavier than air, so it stays at ground level, but it'll all settle in these little coulees and stuff. And a lot of these wellheads are up on hills, so you got to, you know, just be cautious. I should have brought my little gas sniffer with me, because I was up there earlier and it was, well, bringing me back to the old days. It was pretty foul smelling. I don't think it was H2S, but now this is I wouldn't say this is an old pump jack, but it's of a newer design. But yeah, it's pretty much a wellhead up close. I'm looking to make sure there ain't no dead critters laying around anywhere up here. But, you know, maybe this will kind of clear up some controversy. These are not filthy, polluting, dirty things. These are actually very clean. And the way these wellheads work is it's like a series of one-way valves. So as this thing goes up and down, it'll pull the crude up into the actual wellhead, the lower portion of the wellhead where the pump is actually at. So it'll pump it up into a chamber, and then when it goes down, it'll squeeze it and it pushes it up. And that's how it works. It's kind of like a syringe acting on a syringe. But yeah, they're very efficient. Each stroke can be anywhere between, you know, a couple of gallons to you know, the tens of gallons. It all depends on the size of the wellhead pump, the consistency of the oil that they're pumping, and how much natural gas is impregnated into it. And that's the big thing, as wherever you find oil, you'll find natural gas, and wherever you find oil and natural gas, you'll also get hydrogen sulfide. When I surveyed natural pipelines for a time, there's an outfit out there in North Dakota called Bear Paw Energy, and all their lines have 2% H2S gas in them. That'll kill you. You won't even know. You'll just be walking along, you'll take a breath and you're done. Those levels are dangerous. Anytime you start getting into percentages, you're in 10,000 parts per million, and that's dangerous. That'll kill you. So We'll get back in the old Dodge here. Oh. Get you guys situated. Oh, I don't know what I did to my shoulder, but it's not good. I think I might have torn my rotator. It hurts badly. So this whole oil field actually just got bought out. So let me read you some more of the Google box. Geologist George Ketchum recognized the area's potential in 1906, but the first successful wildcat well, that was wildcatting, for those that are not in the industry, is when you bring a rig out to an area where there is no known oil and you just drill a hole basically randomly, and you just drill until you hit oil or you run out of pipe. So they wildcatted out here. The first well was completed October 8th, 1915 by Midwest Refining Company. This oil field spans, you know, through between Montana and Wyoming. During the 1910s and the 1940s, it was a camp town containing a post office, school, barbershop, pool hall, and 2 ball fields. The town was famously harsh in winter, with temperatures reaching 40 to 50 below zero, which is typical. Actually, it's very typical for this area. In fact, it's 23 degrees, which is, it's just weird weather that we're having. We got snow. It's 23 degrees ambient air temperature, and everything on the road is melting, just because the ground's warm. So this is, you know, actually a good oil. It's a high grade, it's light oil. That needed a little refining. They've included deep drilling into the 60s to tap into the Mississippian Madison Formation. So they're going pretty deep. They're getting close to 10,000. So along the town and its houses were largely dismantled in '55, with many buildings moved to the nearest larger town. The field has been operated over the years by major companies, including Pan American, Staniloid, Amoco, Marathon, and others. Like, it's changed hands, and you can kind of see the stages in ownership and developments. Some of the stuff is pretty old. It's been around here, you know, some of these pump jacks, and you'll see some of these tanks. They're pretty rough. They've been out here since like the 60s. There's we don't use reserve pits anymore. Which it makes drilling a little harder. You have a lot more operations going on, but it's a lot cleaner. Yeah, and it's a lot less, it's less environmental impact, because you don't have to dig a giant hole that's bigger than an Olympic swimming pool and deeper, and you don't have to worry about wildlife landing in this thing like frogs, and because people worry about the frogs and birds and random things. And then when your well's done, you know, you don't have to rebury the pit that's got all your cuttings in it. So it's just a lot cleaner. Now they use catch cans and, you know, and fly ash, and they'll dry it and mix it, and they truck it out. It goes to somewhere like a big giant, different place where they can continue to process the dirt and clean it up, and then it's just regular dirt at that point. It's more cost, it costs more to do, but at the end of the day, it's a cleaner process. And this is what the oil industry has done and continues to do to keep up with current guidelines and environmental policies and procedures. Yes, there are some out there that, they kind of, fly-by-night outfits. They try to get away with as little as possible. They make a bad name for everybody. That being said, like this being all public land, like we can pretty much go wherever we want, but like I was saying, you got to be cautious of the wind, and there's not much of it today. In fact, like the reason why I'm parked where I am or the direction I was So if I had to make a quick exit, I could blast right out of right out of that location there, which is also why you'll see everybody backs in oil fields, especially on drilling locations, because if you get a blowout or an H2S kick and you have to exfil a location, you're not having to worry about turning your vehicle around. You just jump in, twist the key, and go. So this, yeah, there's another view. You can see the windsock up on the top of that tank. You can see that one outbuilding. She's pretty rough. That's probably one of the buildings from back in the 60s. There's an older pump jack that's going along. It's a little rusty. Absolute beautiful area it's in though. Wish I had views like this when I was drilling in North Dakota. That would have been nice. But doing this video because, well, like I said, oil field stuff is kind of close to my heart. I did it for 6 years, made a lot of money doing it. It was one of the ways that I was able to support my family during the big recession. The oil field was booming pretty good back then, and I was able to keep my my house, which I bought during the recession, to keep my house and keep food on the table and all the things while working out in the oil field. So I'm grateful for that. I'm also grateful for the oil field for, well, it allows our lifestyle that we all enjoy to be possible, because let's be honest, everything that we touch in our day-to-day life has got some aspect of crude oil in it, whether it's the ink in your paper, the phone in your hand that you're probably using to watch this video right now, or the paint on your Prius. It all comes from crude oil at one form or another. So if you were wondering, that pump jack didn't have any tanks. A lot of these wells are interconnected to these to these random tank farms through little pipelines. Like you see pipeline markers right there. There's pipeline markers over here. You can see where they just put that pipeline in. The pipelines are more environmentally friendly than trucking or using trains to haul the crude oil out of these fields. Usually what causes pipelines to leak is flooding. Like we all remember the pipeline that burst in the Yellowstone. What happened there was, well, that when that pipeline was put in the 40s, which I know this because I've surveyed that, both the natural gas and the crude oil line that went through there. Those were uncoated bare pipe that was transporting natural gas and crude oil under the river. When that stuff was put in, that was they dredged or trenched through the bottom of the river, laid that pipe down and buried it. That pipe was quite a bit under in the ground when they first put that in, but over years of floods and large debris moving about the river bottom, it dug up the pipe, and then the water pushes against the pipe, and eventually it's going to break, especially when you have a tree hit it. So that's just that kind of stuff happens. And that with current technology, they fix that by boring down deep into the bedrock. The river will never touch that pipe again. This is one of that tank farm that I kind of did the intro with. These have like a floating roof on them that keeps the vapor down, from escaping the crude oil fluid. Because the vapors is a lot of what they're after. So when it turns vapor, it the crude oil goes away. Anyways, so these have like a floating roof with like a rubber membrane, and it helps keep the roof like right on the top of the fluid, the crude oil, sorry, and it helps keep it from just evaporating away. Tank farms are kind of bad for the H2S because, well, that's where it can separate. H2S will holy heater. The H2S will get impregnated into the crude oil, and after they pump it into the tanks, it can migrate out. Because they'll ventilate the tanks, and they have ways of they'll like pump it through baffles and stuff, and they'll try to separate a lot of the impregnated gas out of the crude, and get rid of the bad stuff. One of these wells had a pretty gnarly looking flare line on it, and they'll burn off the gas if it's not enough. If they don't get enough natural gas out of these wells where it's worth pumping out and putting onto market, they'll just burn it off. It's kind of wasteful, but we're not talking about a lot of natural gas. Just absolute stunning terrain that this oil field is in. Honestly, I would have never guessed that if I were looking for oil back in the day in here, I would never think that there would have been oil in here. But I think it's, if I remember right, with the geology reports, it's with the breaking of the formations in here allowed the oil to seep up, and why they were having natural oil seeps come up onto the surface, just with the way all the bedrock and lower formations are all broken up due to the shifting of the Earth's crust. So what I don't know is the exact depths that they drilled. I know that the Cat Creek oil field, they weren't going all that deep. They were 4,000 to 6,000 feet down, and then they were going like 6 to 8 feet horizontal. A lot of this oil field was developed before horizontal drilling was a thing. A lot of these were just straight holes. Straight holes had a higher chance of finding a dead hole. So like back in the early days, like, it was, every hole was a risk because you might not find oil. You might know it's here, but you'd still find like dry spots in the formation. That being said, with the advent of horizontal drilling, the horizontal drilling would allow you to go straight down in a predetermined area, but you would drill, say, like under that mountain. You put your well like along the bottom of that mountain, and then drill underneath it and hit more oil, and have a higher chance of hitting more oil pockets. And then when you would frack the well and break the formation, it would flow into the well better, and it also will create a kind of pressurizes that formation too, and it increases the flow. A lot of the wells in North Dakota, after they frack the well and put a wellhead on it, it'll flow for a year before they have to put a pump on it. It'll just go on its own. So that being the case, the horizontal drilling has made drilling for oil so much more effective. It's used everywhere. The Gulf, every oil field in the world uses horizontal drilling. Back like when I first started working out in the oil field in 2006, They were doing 3 horizontal wells off of 1 vertical well, or legs off of 1 vertical well, into 3 different oil field formations. You had the Bakken, the Green River, and the Three Fork. There's $10 million per well is what they were spending. So it got so expensive, and it took so long to recoup the cost of that, they quit doing it. You'd be on one location for 3 months. It took forever. You see more tanks up there. This is another one of some of the older buildings of this operation. You can see up there on the hill, like there's some newer stuff up there. There's some newer stuff up there on the hill there. Well, we're gonna drive this road all the way out and back and around. So we're gonna get to see quite a bit. This is kind of odd. Like I said, normally oil fields don't, from my experience, aren't set up like this, and like there's just wells everywhere out here. Ooh, slipping around a little bit. I mean, this is a pretty large oil field. Lot of infrastructure for this outfit. They got power lines to, coming in for running these pump jacks, running these buildings. They have a pump station here, which if you've never seen a pump station, they're massive. They got radiators that are like 20 feet tall to cool these massive diesel engine, or these massive engines. I'm not sure if they're diesel, if they run on natural gas that they trap from the wells, but yeah, they're massive. When I surveyed pipelines, we were in a couple tank farms that had some pump stations in them, and you'll hear them. They're loud. Well, at least those ones were. I'm sure nowadays they have to have, like, quite a bit of noise control on them. The wind just doesn't know what it's doing up here. Okay, so here's some of the original infrastructure. A lot of that was installed back in the 60s and 70s. And from here, I can't tell you what any of those buildings do or what's in them from here. I know one of them is where the pump station is, where the you only push this stuff so far. Some of this stuff gets trucked out, but a lot of it gets pipelined out, and you can only push it so far before you have to bring it back out. You bring the line pressure back up with a pump station. See if we can't loop around right here and get another view on this. Suppose we should probably turn around right here. A little substation over there. Yeah. So those big towers, I could be wrong, but those look like the gas busters that we would run on the oil rigs. I would imagine they're using that to separate, to froth the the crude and help separate it from any of the natural gases that would be impregnated into the crude oil. Okay, so there's exhaust X right there. I would imagine that gray building is the pump station. See how big those exhausts are? That's not my Dodge you're hearing. That's that pump station going. So now, as far as what this crude was used for, I am not entirely sure. I know a lot of like automotive oils are used with East Coast oil, like out of Pennsylvania and the Ohio region there. That oil is there's natural elements within the oil that make it good for using as a lubricant. I can't remember what that element is. I brain fart, but anyway, that being the case, a lot of the crude that they pump out of the ground here and in North Dakota and in Texas is used for like greases, fuels, tars, lacquers, other plastics, soaps. Yes, your soap has petroleum in it. Like your hair soap. I could do some digging and I can enter it in the video as far as what this crude is used for, because I don't know. I know that the crude oil that we pumped out of the ground in North Dakota was green. It was like it was under black light, it glows, which is odd. That's actually part of the geologist's testing procedure when they're doing their samples off the shale shakers. They'll look at it under microscope and black light, and it'll pop. It'll like glow. It's pretty wild, actually. So I think I missed my turn. Yeah, hydrogen sulfide gas. So wherever they have confirmed cases of it, they will have them signs out. Still got to be careful with them around wells that don't have that, because it can still happen. I'm going to bring you back when I figure out what road I need to use. So I will be straightforward. It's been 15 years since I've stood on an oil rig. So, there's going to be some things that I've forgotten. And not too much of the drilling part, but what happens after the fact. Like I know like the what happens to the well after the fact, but as far as like all the different chemicals they use and in the fracking process, I know a lot of people that work over rigs, and those are dangerous as shit. And I never had any inclination to work over rig, because guys get burned on those. However, 15 years is a long time, so a lot of this isn't quite fresh in the mind. And this oil field's really old. They're doing, not every oil field does everything the same way. This is how innovations start. That being said, I don't think they are doing anything too special with how they're drilling and transporting their crude. I figured there would have been more oil field stuff out on this road, but I was wrong. Either way, as I'll regress. I don't mean to lead anybody astray. If I didn't explain something quite right or clear enough, leave a comment in the comments and I'll try to clarify. So the last time I did it, I was in a pump station was 2008, 9, when I did like 2 years of survey work. In between I had a little break in my oil field career there. So not everything is quite fresh in the noodle. Like I can, I know enough about the pipelining process, like the process in which they would do to when they put a new pipeline. I know like the coatings and the depths that they typically try to put them in, which that's usually a kept secret. Nobody wants to tell you how deep a pipeline is, because if they're wrong and you hit it with your ripper, then they're liable for it and not you. So like that's usually kind of one of those kept close to the vest things. But like I know enough of the industry, the oil transportation industry, outside of a rig location to make myself dangerous. That being said, I am not an expert in it. It's just things you learn while doing. Like being on the rig. My brother-in-law worked over rig. Then I know we got three other people that work over rig. There's then doing the pipeline locating. You learn a lot secondhand from doing that stuff, that you kind of put it all together. Like I said, it's not like I'm an expert in all this. I know enough that when I talk to anybody in these industries, I can at least follow along, if that makes sense. So if I lead you astray, I apologize. If I didn't explain something clearly enough, I also apologize. However, it's been 15 years. Do you remember, how to do something that was 15 years ago and you haven't done since, even though you did it for 6 years or whatever? You might remember parts, but I guarantee you won't remember everything. So when I get to the end of this road, we're going to flip around. We're going to go back through the oil field and check out some more stuff. See some more things, at least get a different perspective, I guess you'd say. That being said, in this part right here, and we're going to get flipped around, and by the time I bring you back, either I'm finding something pretty cool or we're back in that oil field, because I don't think we're going to find much right here. So this is a very different looking pump jack here. Like I said, these pump jacks all look different. They're designed different for different situations. We're gonna park and get out and look at this. I'm not gonna get right up on it, but let's figure this one out. Believe it or not, this is, being a well digger, you're considered a miner too. So this is owned by a different oil field outfit here. But that tank, it looks like a hydraulic ram underneath the wellhead there. I wonder what that's for. Wonder if maybe that's not like compressed nitrogen in there, because there's a gauge on that, and it's not to help lift it. That would be my guess. That is interesting. That looks like Velquero Bighorn is the operator of this field. And we're standing on top of a pipeline. There's the lease information right there. That rod in the ground, that was one of the that's an anchor point for the workover rig for their guidelines. Pretty desolate country out here. This road's got all sorts of not maintained winter road, various conditions, and blah blah blah. Travel at your own risk. I do not know how clear you can see it, but there is a white box right there. That is what is called a rectifier. That puts current down on this pipeline right here as part of the anti-corrosion system for all these pipelines. So all these modern pipelines have like a tar wrap on them, and then they put down a current onto the pipe. Helps keep the pipe from corroding. This science, I can go into it, but yeah, it'd be easier to figure it out, to look it up on your own, because I have a hard time explaining that kind of stuff. But anyhow, depending on like soil consistency and the condition of the wrap and the pipe and other environmental dynamics will dictate how much current gets put onto the pipe. Some of these, like that bare pipe I was talking about earlier in the video, they're putting enough current down on that pipe that you could put a multimeter on a fence post and pick up an electrical current. That's how much power sometimes they will have to put into the pipe to keep it from corroding. It gets to be kind of ridiculous at some points, but that looks like a relatively new, like I said, this looks like a relatively new pipeline. Yeah, and that's a new rectifier box and stand, and that's all new postage. So I don't know when they put this pipeline in, but it goes the entire length of this road, and I want to say this pipeline goes into the Greenleaf refinery in Lore, which is quite a distance. So just another aspect of the oil, how this operation kind of works in a small ball of wax. First, I'll apologize for the truck running. Okay, so when I was talking about the rectifier and attaching equipment, this is where you would attach your equipment. This is a direct link down to the pipeline. So when they survey pipeline, you'd attach a small wire onto this, and they usually come in a spool of 4 miles. So you'd attach onto this, and you would walk along the pipeline, and you're checking for current spikes. That's a cathodic a cathodic test. You're testing you're basically checking the coating on the pipeline, looking for nicks. You're looking for spikes in the current, because you will have some bleed off. So you'll be just right on top of the pipeline, and you'll have, it looks like a multimeter on the foreman's belt, and he's looking for spikes in the graph, and it records everything. So this is the actual pipeline right here. See if I can get down there without busting my butt. So like this part right here is bare because it doesn't need to be coated, because it's not in the ground. But they'll just put this paint on it. Like you can see the weld right there. This has got crude going through it. Now this pipeline is not attached. This is a slider. Because the ground moves constantly, so they don't want the pipeline to be rigid to to these stands. So there's some, it has like a slider so it can move about. And if you actually stand up on the hill and look down this pipeline, it is not straight. That's just a warning marker. But here's another example of how this, you know, how it just rests on these pads so it can move about with the ground movement. I remember one of this pipeline that we did. I don't even remember where the hell we were at, but it spanned a huge like slot canyon, and we had to cross. It was like suspended over the top of it, and we had to like shimmy across it using the basically it was like a suspension bridge. If we slipped, it would have been a very long fall to the bottom, but we had to cross it. There was no other way to get around it without going miles backtracking. But as you see, the pipeline just kind of has a curve to it, and I don't know if that was from when they were putting it on, or if it's because the ground is constantly settling and moving out here and it's just pushing against the pipeline. That could be it as well. You got a creek down there that's flowing pretty good because all this stuff's melting off, but just more interesting facts. I actually do not believe this is a crude line. That when I smacked it, it was very hollow sounding. Most likely is a natural gas line, or they ran a pig through it and it doesn't have anything in it right now, as in they're not pumping. Interesting facts. Pump station. We got 3, one's online, so you need these for crude and natural gas. Like I said, you can only push, especially crude. It's got a lot more resistance in the pipeline. But you can only push it so far before it just wants to come to a stop. So you need these throughout the pipeline. And I imagine that's running off of natural gas, because there's a natural gas line running into this. Would make sense. Burns cleaner, an infinite fuel source. You're not having to fill up diesel tanks, which if they had diesel tanks out here to run these engines, you'd see them. That building is pretty much filled by one engine. They're quite large. Like I was saying, there's quite a bit of infrastructure that goes into the mining of, transportation of, and storage of crude oil and natural gas. It's a pretty large industry, lots of infrastructure that goes in with it. Now, for future video content, I am going to be doing the Montana BDR. It was just released this year. It's the backcountry discovery route. I'm going to be doing that with some friends. Some of which, if you follow both channels that I have, you know, the Montana Dirt Roads and the MDR Outdoor Expeditions, or Adventures, I'm sorry, you will see some repeat guests. The BDR does go through quite a bit of cool historical stuff, some of which I've already been to, haven't put on video yet, just because it's way out in western Montana. As long as my shoulder holds together anyways, that's going to be the plan. As soon as we get some good warm weekends and all this stuff melts off and dries, I'm going to get to finishing part 2, or doing part 2 of that rock art, and get into the TP rings and maybe something else. We will see. Anyways, thanks for watching. If you made it to the end of the video, I thank you for keeping with the ADD. See you on the next one.